In this list, we're going to take a look at 10 games in my NES collection. A bunch of the ones in this list are ports of arcade games, home computer games, and most of them were not done all that well, so let's take a look at them. This is volume 12 of my 10 games in my NES collection, and number 111 in my NES set is going to be Spy Hunter. Now, this one was originally an arcade game. It was released in 1983, and this is one that I always remember seeing and thinking it was so cool. The thought of having a spy car and driving around doing spy things always got me. But wow, do I crash a lot in this one. This one came to us in September of '87 on the NES, and I can remember renting this one. It's just an overhead vertically scrolling shooter, but this is super easy to figure out and even easier to crash into everything. I like that I can drive into these orange trucks and get power-ups like oil slicks and stuff. I think that is really cool. I like that this one makes me want to play it and figure out how far I can go. That and the music. The music in this one is a lot of fun. I love how much it makes me feel like a spy. Now, I can remember renting Spy Hunter as a kid for the weekend, and I remember playing it and thinking it was so cool. And then after playing it for a couple of hours, my parents kicked me outside and I was out riding around my BMX pretending I was Spy Hunter. I'm really excited to have this one in my collection. I do have fond memories of it as a kid, and Spy Hunter is going to be number 111 in my NES collection. Game number 112 in my NES collection is gonna be Bad Dudes. Now, this one is a side-scrolling cooperative beat-em-up developed and released by Data East for the arcades in 1988. Now, in this one, the president has been kidnapped by ninjas. Yeah, ninjas. There's ninjas again. In this one, right away, we're gonna get to pick between two different characters. You either get to pick between Striker or Blade, which seem like very 80s or 90s hero names. Now, this is an arcade port to the NES, and honestly, this one is a fun one. Sometimes it can be a little hard to hit the ninjas before they run off, but it is an enjoyable beat 'em up. The arcade version of this one was one of the top 5 highest grossing games in the US in 1988. Now, while the NES version might not be the arcade version, which is a better game, this is one you can pick up and have fun with. This is one I'm happy to have in my collection, and one that I'm going to keep my eyes open so I can play that arcade game if I do see it out in the wild. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on Bad Dudes, and if you played both the arcade version and the NES port, and which one you liked more. Number 113 in my NES collection is going to be Overlord. Overlord started as a 2-disc computer title that was originally called Supremacy: Your Will Be Done, and it was released in 1990, and then in 1993 ported over to the NES. I kind of feel like there's a theme to this list. It was probably good on the home computer, but the NES version, I don't know. The title theme music is actually pretty good, but then there's just no music. Just all these weird sounds, and I don't really know about that. I'm just not sure about this one. From what I looked up while I was trying to figure this one out, there's several differences between the NES version and the home computer version. The NES version uses fewer screens than the home computer did, even fewer sounds, and had much more simplified controls. From what I read, the original game uses soldiers in platoons that were all upgradable. The NES game condensed the battle elements down to missiles and hover tanks against ground defenses, none of which are upgradable. Sadly, I feel like this is another one where porting it to the NES might not have been the best choice. Game number 114 in my NES collection is going to be Othello. Now, you can also find Othello on the Game Boy as Othello World, and this is based on the board game of Reversi, just marketed as Othello. So we're just playing a board game here. Othello is played with 2-sided black and white chips, also called discs, on a board. The player can choose between black and white. Games are either played versus the computer or player versus player, and the goal is to end up with as many chips showing your color as possible. Now, to do this, you have to sandwich your opponent's chips between a piece of their own color on the board and the piece being played. The game has 4 skill levels when playing the computer, as well as a hidden 5th level if you beat the computer on level 4. And I feel like the commercial we saw for this one makes it a lot more epic than it is.
What's this? Othello? You dare challenge Othello? Defeat me or else! There, you're finished! Not so fast! Play acclaimed Othello for the Nintendo Entertainment System. If you dare!
Now this one again has no music, just the sounds of putting the chips down. I'm gonna have to try this one again now that I kind of know what I need to try and do. But Othello is gonna be number 114 in my NES collection. Game number 115 in my NES collection is gonna be Snoopy's Silly Sports Spectacular. This one is an event-based game that came out in 1990 in North America. And this one is based on the British home computer game Alternative World Games. Wait, another port? In Japan, this one featured Donald Duck, but in North America, we got the gang from Peanuts. And Snoopy is gonna be our main character here. Now this one is brought to us by Kemco, who you might recognize from the Top Gear games. You can play 1 or 2 player modes, and you can either pick the mini game or play them all. Now those mini games are sack race, which is exactly what you would assume a sack race is gonna be. A boot toss, where you're just gonna toss a boot as far as you can. There's a pogo jump, where it's really just a race while you're on a pogo stick. The overboard game, where you're on a gondola and it's Snoopy against his brother Spike, trying to knock each other off. There's a pile of pizza game, where you're just trying to not drop pizzas on the ground. And a river jump, where you're trying to jump over a creek. I mean, it's not a bad game, it's just a lot of button mashing. The graphics are actually pretty good in this one, and as a kid, if I really enjoyed Snoopy and the Peanuts crew, it might have been a fun one to rent and play with a friend for a night. Game number 116 in my NES collection is gonna be Spy vs. Spy. Now this is another Kemco release based on the Spy vs. Spy characters from those Mad magazines. This one I remember from being a kid, and I remember renting this one a few times and playing it with my sister. The objective of the game is to collect the various secret items in a briefcase and exit the building through a door to the airport, either before the opposing player exits or before the timer runs out. In this one, while searching for the items, you can lay traps for your opponent. But if you're not paying attention, those traps can get you too. In this one, each spy has their own personal countdown timer, which gets depleted by 30 seconds every time you die. Yes, in this one, you can just watch the other screen and figure out what's happening, but it can be a lot of fun too. When I play this one, I kind of like to just drop as many traps as I can, and then try and win after the other player has no timer left. This is one I'll always remember as a kid, and I was really excited to pick this one up and play it again all these years later. Number 116 in my NES collection is Spy vs. Spy. Game number 117 in my NES collection is gonna be Pirates, because it's got an exclamation mark on the end. This one was developed by Rare and published by Ultra, who is Konami. Come on, Konami, you're not fooling anyone now. Now, this is another port and is actually a Sid Meier's title. Yeah, the Civilization guy. Now, Pirates is an open world game and is a bit of a hidden gem if you're into games like this. This one was kind of open world before there was open world. In this one, as the name suggests, yeah, we're pirates. Right off the bat, one fun thing about this one is you can pick what time period you want to play in. And every one of them has different factions that will all have control over a different amount of the Caribbean, depending on which one you pick. This one's interesting because you can choose a difficulty, add a family name, and then pick a skill you want to start with. But the apprentice level, you're gonna have all the skills anyways. Right away, you end up in a sword fight, then you get your ship, and we're off and running. Now, once you have that ship, you're gonna start in a town, and you can adventure around in that town. You can go to a tavern to hear the news or pick up crew members. You can trade with a merchant for goods like cannonballs and all sorts of stuff you might need. There's a lot of info you can scroll through. You can see what cities there are and what their statuses are. You can see your status, all the information you have learned, maps for buried treasures, and a few other things. And in the towns, you can also divide your plunder, which is gonna end the game. Something you're gonna wanna do when you're done pirating for the day. The sailing in this one is a little different. It's got a wind effect to it that you'll have to use to sail. You can get into battles with other ships, which does really have some strategy to it. You can battle ship to ship and just try to damage the ship. And when you board them, you'll have to pick between one of the different swords and battle against the other ship's captain, which is kind of a rock, paper, scissors type battle. And it's not the worst battle I've ever seen either. You can take the ship, the ship's crew, and even take them to the merchant and get the ship that you did a bunch of damage to repaired. There's 9 different ships you can sail in this one. This one's really in depth. You can build up your reputation, you can hunt for buried treasure. This one has a lot in it and can be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to play more of this one. Game number 118 in my NES collection is gonna be Xevious. Now, this is another port of an arcade game, a pretty good arcade game that maybe didn't come over quite as good as the arcade version. This one is a vertically scrolling shooter, and the graphics on the NES version don't really jump out at you. Basically, blast the enemies until you get to the boss, and then deal with them. Xevious actually has 16 stages, but it's all just one long mission you'll have to play through, and then you'll come across the boss. And it might not be to the level of the other shooters we saw later on the NES, but it can be fun. The music, though, if you can even call it music, is pretty bad. It's just a bunch of beeping. This one was a super popular arcade game in Japan at one point, but the NES port is just a simple vertical shooter. But this one is a neat one to have in my collection because Xevious is credited as one of the first games to have a boss fight, pre-rendered graphics, and a storyline. So that makes it one that I'm glad to have in my collection. Game number 118 in my NES collection, Xevious. Game number 119 in my NES collection is gonna be Bill and Ted's Excellent Video Game Adventure. Now, I loved the Bill and Ted movies back in the day, so as a kid when I saw this, I was excited to try it out.
No way! Yes way!
Now, I did have this one as a kid. I think we bought it from a movie rental place at one point, so I have memories of this game that I enjoy. But playing it again now as an adult, I don't know. It's not considered to be one of the best games. It's an LJN game, and we all know the stigma behind that. In this one, we're trying to return historical figures back to their times. Apparently, some rebels moved these people out of their times, and that's almost all the story we get. Now, this is a weird one. It starts with a phone book with all the historical dudes we're trying to find. It's got a bunch of phone numbers you have to flip through until you find the one that's flashing red. And if that wasn't the weirdest part, next we have to try to get through these time circuits, which I never knew exactly what to do until I had it as an adult and looked it up. You can just let it happen, but you can also save coins by getting those numbers quicker. Now, once we're finally in the game, it does make an attempt to be 3D. And honestly, it's not even the worst attempt I've ever seen, but it's not the best I've ever seen on the NES either. What really weirds me out is having music at the start of the level, and then all of a sudden it's gone, which kind of makes it boring with no music. There are weapons you can find, and you can try to find a historical figure, but it's really not that easy. You'll need to kind of find an item to lure them out, and to find that, you just need to crash into stuff. I don't know, if you really want to know more about Bill and Ted's Excellent Video Game Adventure, check out Angry Video Game Nerd's review. Just be aware, it's not for kiddos. But it's one I am glad to have in my collection, based solely on the memories of having it as a kid.
Let's visit the land of heavy metal with our most excellent cereal.
Pass the gruel!
Looks like a gruel duel, dude. Heinous display of manners. we've got a most excellent way to start your day. Or night. Bill and Ted's excellent cereal. Cinnamon oats with marshmallow notes. It's the most triumphant part of this complete breakfast.
Awesome cereal dudes.
Who gets the last bowl?
He does. New Bill and Ted's excellent cereal.
It's most excellent!
Now, the last one on this list is going to be game number 120 in my NES collection, which is The Last Ninja. This one, again, has an attempt at being 3D, but this one is rough. It's definitely not the best of the ninja games on the NES in a world of ninja hype from the 80s and the 90s. The controls aren't the best. The hitboxes on the enemies and the items are super hard to get aligned with, and moving him around is really rough. This game can be extremely frustrating and really hard to deal with. If I was gonna pick a ninja game to play on the NES, it would probably be any other ninja game, which is crazy because according to the label on this one, this is a game of the year, which I don't know in what world The Last Ninja is a game of the year. Apparently, you could just call it that back then. But for better or for worse, game number 120 in my NES collection is gonna be The Last Ninja. Now, obviously, this isn't a best or worst list, nothing like that. This is just a list of games in my NES collection, so I can look at them, I can play them, and you can maybe get some memories from them. Bad dudes, bad dudes. Snoopy's Silly Sports Spectacular. Pirates with an exclamation on the end. 119 in my NES collection is gonna be Bill and Ted's excellent video game adventure. And it's based on the board game of Reversi, just marketed as that. Oh,